So now it's time to be able to go through the different number of pages and get the businesses in those pages. So we're going to do this by creating a while loop or using a while loop to actually go through those pages. Now, if you remember back into Yelp, if we actually change the number up here to something different, let's say 300, it's going to actually go to that number, right? So 300. So eventually it's actually going to go through the number of by 10, right? So it's only showing 10 results. And then in some cases, it's actually adding another result as we've seen before. So this page number is what we actually want to change. So there's a couple things that we want to update here, and that is, of course, our URL and how that's actually going to work. So what I want to do now is I'll say while, and then we want some condition, and I'll just say current page equals or is less than 200. All right, so let's set current page being 0. Right, so while current page is less than 200. And what we're going to do is eventually we're just going to do current page plus equals to 10. So each time this while loop is coming through, it's just going to update our current page number. So let's actually go ahead and take a look at that. So we're going to print out the current page, and we're going to go ahead and copy just this little statement here. Paste it in, and there we go. So it goes 0 to 190. So we could also say while it's less than 201, that will actually give us that 200 number as well. So that's something that we also want to see. Okay, so this is where we're actually going to be having this, right? So current page, that has to be at the very end. And then the rest of it is honestly just doing the same stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my URL, and we're going to get the Yelp URL. Now the new page is current page instead of page. And then we have soup parsing the data. And then we want to go ahead and get our business data here by doing businesses just like we've done before. And then we're going to iterate through these businesses with our for loop. And there we go. So I have all the data. It looks like it's the same as the actual file itself, which we will open a file and write it sooner or later. But for now, we'll just leave it out. And then I'll leave this in. Okay, cool. So what we see here now is this while loop that's actually going through all this data. I can get rid of this original page right here. I no longer need that. I just need current page being 0. So this should actually give us exactly what we want. In fact, we should now get 200 results. But what I actually want to do is only print the titles out. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of some of these other things and just print out the title and a space. So I'm going to go ahead and do this while loop now. I'm going to import all the stuff that we need, and we're going to press enter. It is printing the current page out, so it's going to take a second before it actually gets everything. But what we notice is it's going page by page. It's not going to be super fast, but it's definitely getting all the pages as we expect. And then, of course, if I change the actual city like this, I would actually be able to update that even further. And if you take what we've done up until this point, so in 30 Days of Python, you would actually be able to combine some of the things that you've learned into making this just a little bit more robust. Of course, what we just saw here was quite a bit of stuff that was just now created, right? So we have all of these new things, and it's going page by page. Now, what we did notice is that Moby's original fish sandwich has already been in here, but that's not incredibly important. The important part is that we now have all of this other data. But I'm now going to go ahead and get everything in here. And let's go ahead and write it to a file path. I'm going to go ahead and copy what we did before. So we'll do file path, and I'm going to do, we'll keep it as location and just leave it in some sort of text file here. But I'll just put -2 because we already have another one in our repo for that. And then again, we can go ahead and just copy this entire portion here, cut this out, and replace it for what was here. And put this inside of that width. And there we go. So this should now create everything for us. So now what I want to do is I want to actually update this for loop to handle if we get index errors. That is, if there's no address, we should just have something in here that accounts for that. right now it looks for an actual list. So if it doesn't find anything called address within that business, then we're going to have some problems. So I'm going to go ahead and just add this in as a try block. So we'll do try and then get the address. Otherwise, we'll add the exception and we'll just say address equals to none. I'm going to do that same thing for the phone number. And again, try and accept. Phone equals to none. And we'll get rid of this space here. Save it. So we kind of showed you a little bit about this replace call that we attempted to do, and it failed miserably. So what we want to do instead is we actually want to iterate through the address, the contents in there, and see what we've got. So I'm going to go ahead and do this above the try block, and actually we could comment out the try block to see what we're doing here. And we'll just say address.contents now. So address is equal to the contents of in here, not text, contents. Contents will actually be a list. So let's go ahead and print out this address. Go ahead and save it. And let's go ahead and copy everything and paste it into our terminal. So I'm going to go and run it. And something that you should know is yes, of course, we're making this new file and we're appending things and it's loading and stuff like that. But that's not really the point. So I can cancel out this call with Control-C and it stops everything in its tracks. Of course, everything that's already been created, it's already there. But what we see with this address, we now have two separate things for it. Well, in some cases, it might be even three separate things. But what I see here is one part of the list. And this looks like another part of the list, and this looks like yet another part. So what I want to do, these actually could be a whole nother part, so we'll see what actually happens. But the main thing here is I want to go through this address, and I want to make sure if BR or that break line is in there, we're going to just get the text. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll do for item in address. We're going to say if BR, so the break tag is in the string of the item, then we'll just go ahead and print item.getText. Otherwise, we will print the item itself. In fact, I'll do a strip call of space, a new line, a tab, and a return. So I'm stripping out those tags from it itself. So we can actually run through this again, and now I will print out, well, we don't need any more print statements. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that address, and I can just copy from that for loop down. This for loop, notice that businesses has already been defined. We've already defined it when we copied and pasted everything, so I can actually just go through those businesses again, copy this out, and we will paste it in here. And now it looks pretty clean, right? So it's actually printing out in the way we want it to, based off of just what we did here. That is the simplest way that I've found to actually do it. Now, of course, looking back at that address, if we looked at it again, we would see all this other stuff in here. So there's all of these spaces. So that strip call, this right here is getting rid of the spaces. The new line right here, that's what this is getting rid of. And if there was tabs and all that stuff, that formats that first line. And then the BR, if the BR is in the item itself, which it is right here, we just want to get the text. So what I'm going to do now is I need to convert this into two lines for the address, right? This is address line 1, this is address line 2. Now, this is not going to be perfect at all. Of course, this data is not perfect in and of itself, but what I can do at least is make one long line for all this stuff, or two lines. In this case, I've seen some sort of a pattern that I can make it into two lines, and I could parse this data further, but that starts to get more complicated, and it would require something like regular expressions, Python regular expressions, which is something we do cover on joincfe.com. But what you want to see here is we're just going to make some assumptions about this data, that all the data, if there's this one line that's going to be the first line of the address, and this next part is going to be more specifics of that address. Again, it's not perfect. It might not work in other parts of the world, but at the very least, we'll be able to do it here. So now let's go ahead and do this. We're going to say this right here is going to be the first line. So I'll just do first line equals to this item dot strip, and now I'll do second line equals to item.getText. But this actually doesn't work for us. We actually want to add to the second line. So I'll do second line equals to an empty string, and then I'll just append the new stuff by doing plus equals. In there, I might want to put a space possibly, but right now I'm just going to leave it as this. And then I'll put first line up here as an empty string as well. So let's go ahead and print out first line and second line. Okay, I'm going to get rid of these other print statements, and let's see if this works now. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that for loop again, and we'll paste it in here. We got a little bit of a syntax error. Let's see what the syntax error is. Print first line is our syntax error. That's because we need this parentheses here. Just a little mistake on that. Sorry about that. Let's go ahead and copy this, paste it again, and now we've got it, and it looks like it's actually correct. It looks like we actually have it in the way that we wanted. So let's go ahead and get rid of these print statements. We can leave in the print statements for the lines if we'd like, but all of this address stuff we want to put into a try block like we talked about before. So I'm going to go ahead and just put this entire thing in here with the exception of the first line, second line stuff. And then we will do accept and pass again. Now we can just get rid of this right here. And then for our page line, now we'll do address line 1 is equal to the first line, and then we'll do address line 2 is equal to the second line. And of course we want to change how this is formatted just ever so slightly. There we go. So we've got all this stuff. Now we have something a little bit more formatted, a little bit better, and definitely a little bit easier to work with. Of course, again, if you were working with the CSV files or the Excel files, you could actually write this into a actual database. Or if you're working in Django, you could store this into a model, right? So instead of this being a model, so like I'll just give you an example. If you were working with the Django model, you'd do some model, and then you could make an instance of it. Let's just make this code real quick. I feel like this is something you guys might ask about, so I'm just going to do it in advance without actually putting it into a Django model. For those of you who do not work with Django, go ahead and ignore these next few seconds here. And we'll just do object equals to this, and then object.title is equal to that title, object.line 1 or address 1 equals to that first line, and then object.save. Right, so you could go through and create the model just like that. That will save in your database instead of writing it to a file. So that would override that. Okay, so let's go ahead and try this out. I'm going to go into my actual project on the desktop and scrape and day 24. And actually, I'm going to just go ahead and delete this text file that I created from doing some tests. I'm going to copy all this, paste it into the terminal, and I'm going to let it run for the actual thing. Notice that I see some stuff coming in here. This is this stuff right here. So what you see there is literally just showing that code again. But that's really just a comment for ourselves. If we didn't have that comment in there, it's not going to look funny or weird at all. So hopefully this will actually work in our address or at least our text. If we look, it looks like it is. The number itself or the phone number itself is not formatted in a way that we necessarily would like. So I'm going to go ahead and add the strip stuff to that as well. And I'll call this get text instead of just text. And let's go ahead and cancel this. And I'm going to put this note outside of here and then just tab it back. And I'll just say working with Django. Okay. And let's try this again. I'm going to delete that file one more time because of the spacing and all the issues there. And we'll try that one more time. This time it should work. Oops, let's get rid of these extra spaces. The reason I'm getting rid of these extra spaces inside of the copy and paste is just how it works inside of the shell. If you have those spaces, there's going to give some errors probably, which you might have already experienced. Okay, let's try that again. So now it's going to go through. It looks like our addresses are looking a little bit better. The spacing between the lower address and the next one is not quite on there. So again, the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to strip the second line of those things as well, whatever that item is. So let's cancel one more time. And lastly, so we've got our address. That works. That should be, everything else should be okay now that I've stripped those text lines as well. And this should be the last time that we have to do it. Let's delete that file. And we're going to go ahead and run it here. So a couple things to note. You could turn this into a function now that gets a location as a parameter. So we say define. I'm not going to do this. I want to challenge you guys to do it. Define lookup, location, and then you put the location in here, and then you run this while loop. It's actually really simple. It's just taking place of that. You might have to do URL encoding. So URL encoding is something that you might want to look up to make sure your location is good. But this format, as we've already discussed, it does city and then probably state or country. This will actually start to look it up. And if you went one step further and did country, so United States, then it will probably be even more accurate as to what that is. Because especially if you use something like Rome, there's a Rome outside of Rome, Italy. So you might consider just having 3 more things in there. But definitely you'd put Italy, obviously. So you'd do Rome, Italy, and you'd look up that location itself. And then with this function, let's say, for instance, you did create this function and with all this stuff, then to actually run it, you would just do lookup loc and your new location, whatever you ended up putting in there. So again, I want to challenge you guys to be able to do that on your own. If you do find the result, please let us know and submit a request on our site. Okay, so what we see here now is we've got all of our items. So let's go ahead and look up these text files. As it's stored okay, right? So in some cases, like Moby's original fish sandwich didn't store the street address. It didn't store that first line. It just didn't have one, apparently. Maybe it does, but that data is not there. But all this other stuff is there, right? As we see, some of them don't have a phone number. This one doesn't have a phone number, where this one does, and so on. And luckily, it actually stored it better than the way it printed it, right? So it didn't print it that well, but it stored it very well. And again, Moby's original is still in there, but we've got all kinds of data in here now that really just kind of adds a whole nother level to this scraper. It's pretty cool, pretty much straightforward to do. But the other thing that I would want to challenge you guys is to even grab. This is really advanced. If you could do this, bravo. But to grab the link for any given location, open that location, and then get the website if it's actually listed. So this one doesn't have a website. Let's go to one that might have a website. Maybe one of the earlier ones. Del Taco, that should have a website listed. So if I click on this one right here, and we've got a website there. That's what I want to challenge you guys to do now, is to actually grab the business link, open that link, and then grab the website and put it in a format right underneath here. So website right there. I want to see if you guys can do that on your own. Now, of course, that is it for the scraper, at least from Yelp. We're going to talk about scraper a little bit more because there's another thing called, when you work with something that's an Ajax or a JavaScript heavy site, how do you scrape from there? Meaning when you load up the site and it actually runs, some sort of like loading in JavaScript, how do you actually do some scraping there? Of course, this is not going to take into account authentication. That is a whole nother area that we're just not going to cover. But as far as loading up a site and then scraping from there, that is something that we want to cover, and we'll show you that very soon. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.